Hello everyone and welcome back to Shuvra Deb with you. I'm so glad you're here, whether you're one of my regular listeners or whether you're someone new who's landed on this platform. I'm so glad you're here. Today I am talking about imposter syndrome. Yep, imposter syndrome. What it is, why you may have it, and most importantly, how to get rid of it. But first, and my regular listeners amongst you will know that I love definitions and drilling into what something is before getting into the details of the thing. And I also love to explore the topic of what may be causing the thing that I'll be speaking about on a particular show. So, with that in mind, what is imposter syndrome and what are some of the common causes of it? I feel the best definition of imposter syndrome is when you experience self-doubt about yourself or about your ability to do something, to do a task, or perhaps even to be something. It can happen, and it happens mostly, I think, when we embark on a new endeavor. That could be a new job, it could be learning and using a new skill, it could be starting a business, it could be starting at a new school or a college or a university. It could be starting a new relationship or a new friendship. That last one about the new relationship or friendship and experiencing imposter syndrome in that context, I feel that can arise where you may have built up an image of your new friend or your new romantic partner, either because you admire them so much or because you feel they have, a certain something or they're good at something, and you feel that somehow you just don't measure up. The one common feature threading through all of the scenarios I've just described is that imposter syndrome, that feeling or experience of self-doubt is almost always, I feel, accompanied by feelings of inadequacy. If you doubt your ability to do the new job you've just been hired to do, there's a strong chance that you're feeling a little bit inadequate about yourself. And if you're feeling inadequate about yourself and your abilities, there's also a good chance that this may have come about because you're either comparing yourself to actual other people in your life or who you know or who you may know of, or you're comparing yourself to an objective standard that you've put in your head of what you deem to be a better version of the person you already are. Okay, so where can imposter syndrome come from? Right, well, I'm going to speak about this from my own experience of where I feel that imposter syndrome can come from and where it can start from an early stage in our lives. I feel actually can come from others' microaggressions over time, as these things are now called. So to give this a little bit of historical context, growing up in the United Kingdom, as I did in the 1980s and the 1990s, life, it was quite different during those 2 decades and even into the early 2000s than life now is. I mean, certainly in the US, and I'm sure things have changed in the UK now as well. I'd say probably, in the last 5 to 7 years, but I'm guessing because I've not lived there. But the era in which I grew up in the UK, where things were not as progressive as in the US, for example, and my American listeners might be thinking, are we that progressive? Well, I guess that's all up for a debate, but that's for another time. But when I was growing up in the UK, it was quite common for men to refer to women as sweetie or honey or darling, even in the workplace. Or if you're like me and you're a person of colour who is British or American or Canadian or from somewhere where English is your first language, or at least one of your first languages, one of your mother tongues, it was quite common back then to be told, "Your English is really good for a foreigner." This was actually said to me by a guy on a first date in my early 20s, which was actually into the 2000s. Yeah, that was when I was in my early 20s. So suffice to say, with this guy, there was no second date, and the first date came to a swift conclusion. You see, whilst comments like these may seem innocuous or otherwise harmless, in fact, you may be thinking to yourself now, well, that's pretty harmless, or something along those lines. What can happen over time, and with enough instances of these types of microaggressions, whether they were intended to be as such or not, what can happen is that it can lead to an inner dialogue where you start to question yourself. You may somewhere in the back of your mind be thinking, well, are women just seen as the honey, the sweetie, or the darling in the boardroom, the office, even the courtroom? Is my English good for a foreigner? Whatever that even means. Am I a foreigner? Whatever that even means. The impact of these kinds of comments from others can have the effect of knocking your self-confidence and of creating self-doubt. And I feel that this is especially the case if you're a particularly sensitive person who perhaps is inclined to take things that others say to heart. Or if you're young and impressionable, for example, if you're in your early 20s and these kinds of things are being said to you. And so at that stage in life, that impressionable early stage in life, that can be when those seeds of self-doubt are sown. And it may be that this has happened to you and you may not even be aware of it because it was so long ago. It certainly took me a while to work out that perhaps some of the feelings that I was feeling later in life actually came to manifest as a result of these earlier life experiences. Even a teacher or other caregiver being unkind to you as a child could have this effect. In fact, the two researchers who in 1978 coined the term imposter syndrome for the first time, two psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Susanna Imes, they reported two distinct family dynamic patterns that often birthed imposter syndrome. So the first pattern were women who grew up overshadowed by siblings who were deemed to be the more intelligent members of the family, the high achievers of the family, if you like, while the women growing up around them were considered to be sensitive or socially adept. The researchers found that the dichotomy that these women felt between disproving that family perception, i.e. that these women were also intelligent and could achieve highly, and then succumbing to the expectation or the label of being sensitive, that created a persistent internal struggle of self-doubt. According to the research, the second pattern of upbringing that had the capacity to lead to imposter syndrome was the opposite situation. And this featured a situation where the women experiencing imposter syndrome in later life were labelled as the stars, the ones who were able to achieve and fly across any and every aspect of life and were praised for being able to foster perfection. However, for this second group, they had had an illusion created around them. And when they encountered real-life situations, that illusion shattered, and then this for them gave rise to feelings of imposter syndrome. Okay, I think I can hear you thinking, and certainly I did the first time I read about this. This research, it was done in the 70s, late 70s, and it was undertaken only in respect of women. So is there a gender bias there? Is there even a time bias? Because many of us were alive in 1978, but life has changed dramatically since then. And you may have a point. There may be a bias there, and the research may have aged. But notwithstanding that, thinking about it, my view is that there's no reason why these feelings of either being praised to excess or being made to feel like the underdog in the family shouldn't still apply to people growing up generally in families, in situations generally where this kind of thing can happen. And, in my view, I don't think it's just something that can only apply to women. There's no reason why these findings should not also apply to men. We are all human after all. And as much as society likes to build divisions around men and women, it still remains the case that we're all in human bodies and we all experience the same feelings, which is one heck of a unifying feature of life as a man or as a woman. So, having identified what imposter syndrome is, at its heart, it's the feeling of self-doubt or of inadequacy. And having identified where it can come from, essentially early life experiences, the next question then becomes, what can we do about it? Okay, so I am going to give you 5 tips to help you on your way to conquering, combating, overcoming, getting rid of imposter syndrome. My first tip on dealing with imposter syndrome is to be authentic. Yes, be authentic, which is the opposite of faking it till you make it. Rather than shying away from or hiding your authentic, your true self, who you actually are, for fear of backlash or criticism, embrace your authenticity. You see, if you don't embrace who you truly are, you will spend so much of your time acting the part of who you think you should be, of who you think others expect you to be. And by doing that, you will lose the most important connection that you have in your life. And I've only discovered this myself recently. The most important connection we all have in our lives is that connection with ourselves. Think about it from this perspective, if you like, from the perspective of the other. How many times have you started a new friendship or started dating someone or even gone as far as getting into a relationship with someone, only to find out a few weeks or months or even years down the line that the person you're in this relationship or friendship with is not the person you thought them to be? They're not the person they presented themselves as in the initial stages of that friendship or of that romance. If this has happened to you, then you'll know how disappointing this can be. Equally, looking at it from the other perspective, if you're the person not being yourself and you're trying to fit some kind of mold, trying to fit something you think other people want you to be, you will be found out. And that's not your imposter syndrome manifesting if that happens. That is simply where you have not been your authentic self to start with, and it's all come crashing down around you. And that's because it's impossible to maintain a persona. By not embracing your true self, your authenticity, you will also be knocking your self-confidence. Your self-confidence will take a hit because you will be playing a part. And by acting a part, the knock-on effect of all of that is that you end up feeling very, very uncomfortable inside of your own skin. And that can be a slow creep of discomfort. So you may not even realize it's happening. And it's happening because you are disconnected from yourself. And if you're still afraid you won't be accepted by your peer group or your family, then I would say grab the bull by the horns and be your authentic self anyway. It's only when you are your authentic self that you find your true tribe. You find the people with whom you align the most, who align with you. It's only when you move through life from a place of genuine self-connection that you are able to truly connect with others in a meaningful way. The alternative is to go through life pretending to be something or someone you're not, having friendships and relationships that are not truly fulfilling and are surface level, and constantly worrying somewhere in the back of your mind that you're going to be found out, that someone's going to catch you. And in my mind, all of that is just a bit too stressful. So avoid that stress, be authentic, embrace your authentic self. My second tip on dealing with imposter syndrome, and this applies particularly in the context of a new job or a new college or school or embarking on a new path generally in life. My tip here on conquering any imposter syndrome is to do a quick life review and recall and remember all of your successes and accomplishments that you've notched up over the years. Look back at difficult situations or times that you've had in the past and The fact that you've dealt with and overcome those. Those situations may not have been easy. In fact, they may have been downright awful. But you got through them and you learnt some lessons in the process of going through all of that. So remind yourself of your successes and your accomplishments. Write these down on a piece of paper and then keep that piece of paper near you somewhere where you can easily access it. So the next time you're having that moment of self-doubt or feeling inadequate, remind yourself of your abilities and your successes in those moments. And when those times creep up and you're in the moment of it, if you keep that piece of paper somewhere near you, somewhere you can just grab it, then it's such a great way of picking up something that's a quick reminder of something that you've achieved. Or lots of things that you've achieved, because there will be lots of things. The benefit of writing all of this down on paper is that you're actually forced to think about what your successes and accomplishments are. I've found that when I've done this process, I've actually found in my brain, tucked away somewhere, things that I consider to be achievements that I've forgotten over time. And it's only by being forced to recall what these were that I was able to recall them and then write them down. Right. So my third tip on dealing with imposter syndrome is to embrace the fact that perfection is a myth. No one is perfect, and no one gets any task done to perfection. It's only with knowledge and experience and using your intuition that you improve as a person or at tasks and at jobs. Perfection or wanting to be perfect can actually lead to paralysis, and it can lead to a fear of committing to something that you know you need to get on with. It can also lead to a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of self-criticism, because you deem yourself to not be measuring up to some crazy high, unattainable expectation or standard that you've set yourself. So, one of the ways that you can let go of perfection is by setting realistic expectations of yourself. For example, if you have a piece of work to do and you're being asked how long it's going to take you, embrace the fact that it's probably going to take you longer than your brain is allowing you to believe in that moment. And that's because our brain has an ability to underestimate the length of time something will take. This has been called the planning fallacy, which is a way of describing our tendency to underestimate the amount of time a task will take to complete. In spite of knowing all of this, I still do this. I still underestimate how long something's going to take. And all of this is down to the brain's overall bias towards optimism. So maybe you're an extreme optimist if you're constantly underestimating how long things are going to take you. At least that's how I like to see it. But circling back to this in the context of perfection, by giving yourself a more realistic time estimate on how long the task may take to complete, you are taking the pressure off because you are setting a realistic expectation rather than trying to be perfect and completing the work really quickly or, say, yesterday. My fourth tip is to reframe your feelings of self-doubt or inadequacies that have led to imposter syndrome. Reframe those feelings into different feelings. Remember that self-doubt is not a condition or a characteristic or permanent. It's not like your eye color, for example, which is a part of you. It's a physical characteristic and generally permanent. Self-doubt or feelings of inadequacy are just like other feelings and emotions. They are temporary, impermanent, and in motion. Take this moment now, for example. As you listen to this show, if right in this moment you're having a sense of self-doubt or feeling inadequate about something, go back in time. You may not have to go that far back in time, in fact. But go back and remember the point in time that gave rise to the self-doubt that you're experiencing in the moment that you're experiencing it. Was it having a job application rejected? Notice that it was the application that was rejected, not you. Was it an email you received that made you feel self-doubt because of its contents? Was it a throwaway remark made by somebody that you took personally? Or maybe it's been a slow creep of low self-confidence. If so, where has that come from? What was the initial trigger? What was the initial moment that made you feel self-doubt? And then what were the feelings? Did you feel sad or disappointed, perhaps? If so, then do these two things. Firstly, go back to your list of achievements and accomplishments that we just looked at, that if you've already put together, or you will hopefully be putting together quite soon. Look at those accomplishments and successes and remind yourself how far you have come. Then secondly, and this is almost a bit of a waking meditation, if you like, go back to that memory. If you've been able to identify and pinpoint the moment in time that led to the self-doubt that you're experiencing now in the moment, then go back to that moment in time when that thing happened, or when whatever it was that was said to you was said to you. In going back to that moment and in reliving that moment, associate a different feeling with that moment rather than the sadness or the disappointment. For example, if it was a job application being turned down, find what you gained from that experience. Did it force you to improve your resume, for example? Did you find yourself networking and making new contacts to see what other jobs you could go for? Did it actually focus your mind onto a completely different job, something better that you actually wanted more that you hadn't thought of? Once you've found those gains, those wins from that moment, feel the feelings of those gains, of those wins. Excitement, maybe. Gratitude? Enthusiasm for a new and an unexpected step on your path. You see, by changing the narrative and your perspective in this way, you can turn a previous moment in your life that once caused you to feel sadness and disappointment, which led to self-doubt or inadequacy, you can turn that moment into something completely different. You can associate new feelings by focusing your attention on a different aspect of that event. By seeing what you gained from that event, the new feelings you can have from that event are just way more positive and more constructive feelings, such as excitement, gratitude, looking towards a new opportunity. And if this doesn't work the first time, then try again. The more you do something, the more your brain gets used to that new way of doing, acting, or thinking, and we're going back to building habits again. If it doesn't work the first time, try again. It's worth a shot. My fifth tip on overcoming imposter syndrome is a continuation of the fourth one in a way, is to focus on growth and learning. If you're experiencing imposter syndrome in a new job or having moved to a new country, for example, there are things that you can do to gain more knowledge and experience. For example, by being in and doing the new job, you are gaining experience. By exploring your new country and speaking to the people who live there, you are gaining knowledge and friends. If there's an educational aspect of your work or of a skill you're working on where you feel you may be lacking in experience or skills or knowledge, then get those skills or experience or knowledge. I'm such a fan of YouTube for this. Everything is on YouTube. For example, when it comes to video editing, even, say 4 months ago, did I have a clue about how to upload a video, edit a video, put things on them called overlays? Nope, I did not. But YouTube is my friend in moments like these. And then, once you've acquired those skills, the experience, the knowledge, and you're building those up because you're not going to get there overnight, you have to build them up, then go back to accepting that a lack of perfection is the norm. If you've seen any of my YouTube videos, you'll see that they're not the slickest videos. The lighting's probably a little bit off and the camera frame may even be a little bit wonky. But so what? I'm just starting out and it's a step. And sometimes that's all it takes. So, in conclusion, on today's show, I spoke about ways in which you can deal with imposter syndrome, and I offered 5 tips. Firstly, be your authentic self. Don't fake it till you make it. Just be you. And you will connect with yourself in such a beautiful and meaningful way that there will come a point where you can't be anything other than who you truly are, and everyone around you is going to love you for that. My second tip is to write down and make a list of your successes, achievements, and accomplishments over the years, and to keep this list to hand so that you can grab it, pull it out, and read it the next time self-doubt starts to creep in. Thirdly, embrace the fact that perfection is a myth. No one, nothing is perfect, except possibly sunsets. We all fall, stumble, and make mistakes. And it's from those experiences that we grow and we learn. It helps to set realistic expectations rather than, for example, rushing to complete something when realistically you know it's going to take more time. My fourth tip is to reframe feelings of sadness and disappointment that have led to self-doubt, leading to imposter syndrome, historically, where you felt rejected, for example. Reframe those feelings into something else by having a different perspective, looking at that situation from a different angle. What did you gain from it? And allow that to get you excited. My fifth and final tip for conquering any imposter syndrome is to focus on growth. If there's a skill set in which you feel you're lacking, then learn more about it and use that knowledge to overcome any low self-confidence, any imposter syndrome. If you're enjoying this show, you will be helping me loads to reach more people like you who will be able to enjoy and benefit from my episodes. So if you'd like to help me and if you'd like other people to reach the show, then please do go ahead, rate, review, share, and follow my show on any of the podcast platforms or on YouTube. So if you like this, then please go ahead and do that. If you're listening on the radio on 89.1 in Cayman or overseas, please do go ahead and check out my podcast. It's called Shuvra Deb With You and is available on all of the usual podcast platforms. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. Bye for now.